Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Creation Myths. Today, I have for you a quick creation trick. Today's creation trick that we'll be talking about is very simple. The trick is to just fake it. And we see this all the time among creationists, both professionals and amateurs. They make an argument, but they don't actually understand the ideas and the concepts and even the vocabulary behind the argument they're making. So, like, for example, you see John Sanford arguing for genetic entropy. He doesn't understand the population genetics that's relevant to genetic entropy, right? He doesn't actually understand the math of what's going on under the hood there. He's just making this simplistic form of the argument. So today I'm going to show you three examples of creationists who are just making stuff up, making arguments without even knowing the basics of the argument they're making. And the really fun thing is the three examples I'm going to show you run the whole spectrum, from just randos on the internet to professionals who really ought to know better. So our first example of a creationist just faking it, making an argument without actually knowing the words that he's using in this argument. Our first example of this is actually our friend Standing for Truth. A while back, I found myself on kind of an open mic panel situation talking with him about the human chromosome 2 fusion, and he made an argument for why it's not actually a fusion without knowing one of the most important words in the argument he was making. So take a look.
There are aspects of human chromosomes and your grade 8 chromosomes, specifically chimpanzee and gorilla chromosomes, that do have some pretty significant differences. Here in this paper, it talks about the presence of these large blocks of subterminal heterochromatin and this lack of satellite DNA around human chromosomes.
Yeah, so what's heterochromatin specifically?
It's repeated DNA, basically.
Not necessarily. It doesn't have to be repeated, but structurally, what's heterochromatin?
Structurally, what is heterochromatin?
What is heterochromatin?
Well, it's basically pieces of DNA within the chromosomes that is repeated oftentimes. That's my understanding.
It's not. It doesn't have to be repeated though. So the characterization heterochromatin is independent of the sequence. It refers to the physical conformation of the DNA.
Okay.
What does that mean? What is heterochromatin?
Well, I think you're playing word games here because it is. Wait, Dan. I want you to answer the question: why is this DNA? Well, why is this structure within the DNA? These structures within the DNA.
I'm answering. I'm in the process of answering that question, but I think you're making the argument without knowing what the words mean.
Okay, how would you define it if it's not just repeated pieces of DNA, basically?
I just want to be clear, though.
That's my understanding. So if you want to,
okay, so you're wrong. Okay, so heterochromatin refers structurally to DNA that is in a condensed state in the interphase nucleus, right? So do you know what those words mean?
In the
condensed, it's like structurally it is supercoiled rather than being in a diffuse state, right? So the nucleosomes are not exposed, right? They're supercoiled so that you don't have access to enzymes that would do things like express genes. Okay, that's what heterochromatin is.
Well, it's thought to be tandem repeats.
It is largely repeats, but it doesn't have to be because it's cell
here's
types.
The thing. Listen, here's the thing. You just want to posture because I did give the correct answer, and then you want to get hyper technical, which I'm fine with.
You didn't give the correct answer. The second example we're going to look at today comes from an interaction I had, kind of an impromptu debate I had with fake Dr. Kent Hovind. So in this discussion with Kent, I started by asking him, since he says well, you can't get new kinds, I asked him what mechanisms of evolution don't work, right? We have all these mechanisms and what's the problem with these mechanisms? And he went right to his script. So I said, well, hang on, let's just start here. Just tell me the mechanisms. Let's just start there. What are the mechanisms we're talking about? And as you'll see, he had a little bit of trouble with this question, but he did ultimately admit that he does not know the basic mechanisms of evolution, despite insisting that they don't work. Take a look. Let's start here. Let's start narrow biological evolution. What are the basic mechanisms of biological evolution? Let's start there.
Well, you'd have to answer that question since you're the one who believes
No,
in
I'm
it.
asking you because you say
Okay.
it can't happen.
I think we've never observed any animal produce what
That's the
anyone
script.
with half a brain cell would call a different kind of animal. We don't observe this. You can imagine it all you want.
Sure.
So what mechanisms? Give me the list of mechanisms that you think work
No.
for your religion, and I'll be glad to dismantle it.
Here's the thing, Kent. I don't think you know the mechanisms of evolution, so I'm asking you. I think you're talking about something that you don't know anything about. So I would love to provide evidence for this, but I don't think you know what the topic is actually about. So like in my class, when I teach intro evolution, there are 5 basic mechanisms of evolution. Do you think you can name them?
Dan,
Well,
instead of a mini quiz, can you just provide your evidence for evolution?
Yes, I'm getting there,
fantastic.
but it's based on these
Okay.
mechanisms, and if he doesn't know the mechanisms, then what I'm saying won't matter.
All right.
Okay.
Well, the time's short, so
Tell you what, mutations is one of them.
There's one. You got one.
So go ahead. What's your next
Go ahead,
mechanism?
Dan.
Yep. Okay, so you got one mechanism of evolution. What are the other 4? I bet there's one that everybody can get because Darwin came up with it. I bet everyone knows that one, right?
Okay.
Well, Dan, why don't you? Okay, Kent, go ahead.
Yeah, Ken, go ahead. What's the other 4? What are the other 4? If you knew them, you would have already said them.
Feel free. Go ahead.
So everybody, if Kent knew the 5 basic mechanisms of evolution that you learn in an intro bio class, he would have said it right there. So he doesn't know the basic mechanisms. Okay, I want to make that clear for everybody.
And the fact that I don't know what you teach in your class, send me the 5 mechanisms and I'll debunk them one by one.
But that wasn't all from Kent. It actually got better because he ended this part with the most bananas explanation for an aspect of biology I have ever heard. It's just incredible how confidently wrong this man is. So talk about faking it and just like pretending you know stuff that you're completely wrong about. Check this out. We all know what recombination is, how that works. It happens even when humans reproduce, right? When mom and dad and the genetic recombination happens. Good. We're all on the same page with recombination. Kent, I've heard you describe that process in the most bananas terms I've ever heard in my life, where you say that the DNA from mom unzips and the DNA from dad unzips, and then the half strand from mom and the half strand from dad zip up together. Is that your understanding of how recombination works?
That is how it works with half the DNA code.
That's not how it works. Needless to say, that is not how that works at all. I have no idea why he thinks that, but there you go. This final example might be the funniest of the 3 because this is from a real professional. I mean, Kent, he's a professional. He does it for a living, but we all know he doesn't know what he's talking about. And everyone knows that. He knows that. But this one comes from my bestie, Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson, Harvard PhD, in his pretty famous debate at this point on his first book, Replacing Darwin, with Dr. Herman Mayes. And in this debate, to Dr. May's confusion, Jeanson kept mispronouncing the name of a particular person, even though he was using that person's book as the basis for his argument. So take a look at this, and then we'll talk about it for a second here.
Anything that he thought I misstated. I was trying to draw on what Fukuyama's written and others.
What about human mind? What?
I actually cited Fukuyama. Anyway.
Well, the first correction is his name is Fatuma.
So what's going on there is Jeanson is repeatedly insisting, right, that, oh, well, I'm getting this equation. It's from this book. It's from this book. It's from this book. And it's like, who are you talking? Whose book are you? Oh, Fatuma. That's who you're talking about. Jeanson clearly has so little experience and such a lack of familiarity with this field that he doesn't know the name of the person who wrote the book that he is citing as like the authority on this. He's just faking it. He doesn't actually know the field he's talking about. He just thinks he could take this one little snippet and drop the guy's name and poof, that absolves him of all responsibility to make a further argument. When the fact is, he doesn't actually know the basics of the field he's using to make his argument. He doesn't even know the name of the person whose book he's citing. Unfortunately, this is extremely typical behavior for creationists. They just make an argument, thinking it sounds good, but they don't actually understand the basis for the argument. They don't understand the field they're arguing in. They haven't taken the time to even learn the vocabulary and the basic foundations of the field that they're using to make whatever argument they're using. We see this again and again and again. So what we, people who try to deal with creationists, need to do is call them on it. If you're engaging with a creationist and they make an argument based in some biological science or non-biological science, I'm sure, but my field is biology, so that's where I see these things happen. They make an argument grounded in science. Call them on it. Make them explain that science to you. Show that they can understand it. Make them define the terms that they use. If they're going to use a technical term, make them define that term. If they're going to use an equation, make them explain that equation. Where did you get that? How does that work? Explain this to me like I am 5, like I have no experience in this field at all. A lot of the time when you do that, they're going to faceplant because they haven't actually taken the time to learn the field, as we saw in the 3 examples I just showed you. So I encourage everybody, again, when you are engaging with creationists, make them show that they actually know what they're talking about, because a lot of times they don't, and once they're publicly exposed as not knowing what they're talking about, their arguments fall flat. This has been the creation trick of Fake It. Thanks for watching, everybody. Please subscribe to the channel, hit like, share it, leave a comment, and remember, don't get fooled.